Hey guys, my name is Vanessa. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 8th, 2017. My laptop just scared me. It was very loud. Today is January 23rd. I'm going to read through the Keep It Simple book, and you can follow along if you have the same book. What happens is I'm going to read through it, I'm going to reflect on it, and then I'm going to invite you to leave your experience in the comments. I am so grateful for every person who leaves a comment, and I am going to be responding to them all shortly. And I think that that's all that I have for right now. Okay, January 23rd. And also, I don't read these before I sit down and record, so we are surprised at the same time. Okay, sex, like all else between human beings, is never perfect. Theodore Isaac Rubin. Addiction made our sex lives a mess. Maybe we wanted perfect sex, or we wanted no sex. We were afraid. Maybe we wanted a high from sex we just couldn't seem to get. Some of us had lots of sex partners, some of us had none. What now? We're doing what we need to do by being in recovery. We're getting to know ourselves. We're living by our real values. We're being honest with ourselves and others. We're learning to love and care about others. It's open, honest, caring. We express with our bodies. Sex can be trusting and safe. Prayer for the day. Higher power, I turn over my sex life and my will to you. Just for today, I know you want me to be happy. Action for the day. What do I believe about sex? How does it match with what's said in the third paragraph above? Yeah, so I mean, I definitely identify with some of this. Addiction made our sex lives a mess. Well, that is an understatement. You know, in my addiction, I really did have a very skewed perception of what the value and what the meaning of sex was. And and it lost even more meaning in my addiction. There really was no value for life. Clearly not my own. I was drinking and driving, didn't care about other people's lives because I was also and I can't blatantly say that I didn't care because it's not like I was walking around being clearly antisocial, but risking my own life and the life of others by drunk driving is an act of antisocial behavior, right? Because it's a potentially deadly, fatal behavior that runs opposite to our natural instincts to want to survive and to not hurt others. So, now take that overall feeling of how I was interacting with the world and how I interacted with myself, and then put sex on top of it. I felt like I had no real responsibility, no real accountability, no real dignity in the act of sex, and nor what it was supposed to mean to me. Now, I know when I feel like also there's this whole thing that is part of my Christianity, which was never actually really part of my identity, of this like purity culture, right? Like that is also just part of the culture that we're weirdly brought up in, which is also doesn't make sense with capitalism and how sex sells, and they're kind of pushing sex on you at every given moment. And then with the rise of like internet pornography and stuff like that, like they're giving us, it's conflicting to know where you should be on the spectrum of sex. And I like how it talks about in the big book, it says, it's so ridiculous, but yet it's so relevant and so on point how they talk and address about sex. And first of all, they say that like we can't be the arbiters of anybody's sex lives. There's no sponsor who should be telling you what you should be doing. There's no like actual rules written in the big book about you have to wait a year or you have to do this or do that. The ultimate thing is to get clear on your own motives, right? So get clear on, this is why, well, I have been told the closest thing that I've been told to like a rule about having relationships in sobriety is like wait until your seventh step, because after the seventh step is when you're really free and you're really cleared of any resentments, any belief that might harm you and other people in more intimate relationships, and especially in sexual relationships. And so I found that to be extremely helpful. And then I was also celibate for a couple of years because I just didn't want to engage in relationship like that once I really got to reflect and look at my sex inventory and see how, I had used sex both as a weapon and had it weaponized and used against me. And I mean, that's just not anything that we should be doing with something so precious as our bodies, right? Nor should we ever do that with something so precious as another soul. And, I do feel like there is, and that's to say that, like, I don't feel like you need to get married and, like, do that to, like, engage in sexual relationships. But what are your intentions when you're engaging in them? Are you, in fact, looking for a high? And sometimes, a lot of the time, actually, when I was in my addiction, I was looking for a high from sex that I just wasn't getting anywhere else, or I was manipulating situations because I knew that I could get something from sex, or from even teasing the idea of possibly providing sex, right? And it's really disgusting, honestly, to think about. It's not really my proudest time. My early 20s were not really intentional with any with dignity. I mean, that's not to like talk crap on myself, but I was doing the best that I could, and that was how I kind of made life have meaning. And people got hurt because of it, and I got hurt because of it. And it really, I mean, there were some things that happens that really kind of altered the way that I perceive my relationships with men in general, and how I see men at all now. And then, but I wouldn't say that I was necessarily ever like a man hater. I didn't really hate men ever. I see like their value, I guess, just as like people. But I never really wanted to let my guard down around men. I definitely did not ever feel safe around men. And even to this day, I'm really particular about the men I keep around me. And when I find men who I feel safe around, I do kind of like want to make sure that they stay in my life. And, there's different types of safety, and some of that is just knowing that they're not just looking at me to want to use me for sex, or that that's not at all that they're kind of going after, right? And honestly, a little bit, something that I'm kind of like enjoying, getting a little bit older, maybe like I'm not the target anymore. I feel a little bit less like a target to men in a way. I think also the culture has just changed a little bit about around this, like the whole Me Too movement kind of changed things, which thank God, because I don't think that men truly understand what it's like to be a woman and just to always feel like prey, and I mean, I'm not gonna get into that, but there really are just like, we have to be so careful about the way that we navigate the world. And I think that in my early 20s, I knew that that was the society, the culture that I was being brought up into. And I was a little resentful about that. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be taken advantage of. I'll take advantage first. And what's interesting is that I ended up, just hurting people. And I wasn't able, even when I was in a relationship with someone who I thought I was going to be with long term, I kind of let myself not be as open and vulnerable as I knew that I could have been in that relationship. And everything happens for a reason. It is what it is. And I've made amends as I needed to. And I feel pretty good about cleaning up most of those that I've been able to. Although there's two people that I have not been able to find, genuinely do not even remember either of their name, but I caused quite a bit of harm. And then also, there's a part of this story that I don't usually talk about. And maybe I'll do another video on that one someday. I don't know, when I talked to my sponsor the first time I went through this step work and disclosed this one part of my history, it was like a weight was lifted, and for whatever, and I completely forgot about it because I'd carried a lot of shame around it, and blah, blah, blah. And then it just kind of recently popped up in my head again lately. And I'm like, I wonder why that's coming up now. But so maybe I need to make a video on it, but I don't know, because it impacts more people than just me. So I'll have to really think about that. So anyway, this thing about, we were afraid, this is true. I think a lot of people also use sex as a substitute for intimacy. I think that men specifically, and women do this too. This isn't a gendered issue, but I think that people who are emotionally unavailable tend to use sex as a substitute for feeling connected to somebody else. And although a lot of the language around it can be like, no, I'm just kind of having fun. This is just what I'm doing. This is just like the conquest. This is the game that I'm playing. There is a fear underneath that maybe trying to reach for more is just out of reach or something, right? And, being honest with ourselves and others about our intention and our real values is very important. I won't engage in casual sex anymore. I don't find any value in it. And, and kind of the more woo-woo frame, I feel like energetically there's an energetic exchange that happens. And sometimes when engaging in, relationships like that with somebody, who isn't necessarily an energetic match, I can feel kind of like bad vibes. And I'm just like, oh, get that away from me. Because I do think that there is some like soul exchange that happens. And, I'm just a lot more careful about that now. Yeah. So being honest with ourselves and others, learning to love and care about others. Yeah, it's open, honest, caring we express with our bodies. That is something that I just do think is really valuable, really important. Is one, when I went through my sex inventory and made all my amends, the biggest takeaway that was that, like, I think that we're accustomed to the narrative of like men treating women like objects and just like a piece of meat. And it's like, oh, I also did that to men because I wanted to, depreciate their value so that I could get away with it myself, like treating them in a specific way, and it's just like not genuine to who I am, nor in what I want, nor how I would want to be treated. And so being able to come clear on like, oh, actually, this is still like a child of God that does still need some respect and some dignity, and that's how I need to be viewing them. That's why I don't even follow like men who follow like Instagram models or like OnlyFans people. I'm like, you're devaluing somebody. You can say that you like somebody's, whatever, you're just following because for whatever reason, but it's a major ick, like right off the bat. I'm like, that's gross. You think that women are just objects. That gives me a really clear understanding of what I am to that person. Yeah, I have not heard any good reasons for following people like that. And this isn't a knock, by the way, on the Instagram models or anything, or even the people. They are clearly very smart to be serving a certain market, right? Like, hey, sex work is work. It really is. And I'm not saying the Instagram models are that. I'm just saying we all know the types of accounts that those are. But anyhow, so yeah, I do think that sex is an expression of how you feel about somebody, and the pleasure and the joy that comes from that is still from a holy experience, like this is what I think is so deeply misunderstood sometimes about these. And I don't think you know where I'm going to go with this, but there really is something sensual and erotic about being in a deep communion with God. And I know that sounds like out of left field, but I can assure you that when you have reached this level of like, this is something that I'm always like striving for and that I lose connection with sometimes. When you are able to be in this present experience of God and feeling that, you feel much more connected to yourself and you feel so much more connected to the person who you care about. And like that is like something that is like just charged energetically, or that you want to express with your body, and that is fun and that is enjoyable. And it's like, that's why sometimes when I cannot getting that with somebody, I'm like, yeah, it's just not gonna happen with this person. It's like, or when you do feel that with somebody and it's just like, okay, this is somebody who's more on my wavelength or whatever. There's something really erotic and sensual about that. And all that is, I think, really is a reconnection to this higher power, this greater power that is all that power, because there is so much power in like sexual energy, and that all comes from this place of like creation, right? And it all kind of evolved from this connection that we have with God. And so I think that's amazing. I remember listening to one of the women in my recovery community. She got married and she'd been trying to have a baby with her husband. And this was after, she had had 11 years sober, and then she'd relapsed and then really struggled and almost died trying to get sober again. And so her husband was really hesitant for them to move forward with having babies until she could really get grounded in her own recovery. And I think that for a time, maybe she was thinking that the prospect of having a child would keep her sober, but her husband knew better and was like, let's get your sober down first, and then we can try to have a baby. And so they'd been trying, and one of the things that she would say, which sounded crazy when you just hear it at a podium in like a church basement, right? But that makes so much sense now that I'm hearing it again, is she would just say like, when she's having sex with her husband and that moment of like orgasm, she's like imagining God being in the room with them, and also, God being there to orchestrate like conception or whatever so that they can have a baby, but also recognizing that the pleasure that she was receiving was from God. Like that goodness is from God. And it sounds crazy to be like, wait, you're imagining God in the room is God in the room with us now, like when you're naked, and it sounds kind of crazy, but like I understand where she was coming from with it. So yeah, all that. Anyway, And also, if you really look into like Catholic mysticism, that whole experience, like with the saints, with like the nuns were experiencing, it is very, if you read any of the texts, it's like very, the undertones are incredibly sexual because there is just this intimacy, which is what sex should be. You have that intimacy with God. It is pleasurable, right? And it is sensual. And when you can have that with another person, it is the same thing, right? So anyway, all that to say that that is a far cry from the gross casual hookups and one night stands I was having in my early 20s. Okay, so I'm going to go back through and read through this again. Really curious if you want to leave a comment on sexual behaviors. Like I said, I don't ever read these before I sit down to record. So it's like, yeah, leave a comment. Tell me about your sex life. January 23rd, sex, like all else between human beings, is never perfect. Theodore Isaac Rubin. Addiction made our sex lives a mess. Maybe we wanted perfect sex or we wanted no sex. We were afraid. Maybe we wanted a high from sex we just couldn't seem to get. Some of us had lots of sex partners. Some of us had none. What now? We're doing what we need to do by being in recovery. We're getting to know ourselves. We're living by our real values. We're being honest with ourselves and others. We're learning to love and care about others. It's open, honest, caring. We express with our bodies. Thus, sex can be trusting and safe. Prayer for the day. Higher power, I turn over my sex life and my will to you. Just for today, I know you want me to be happy. Action for the day. What do I believe about sex? How does it match with what's said in the third paragraph above? Well, thanks for watching. If you have not subscribed yet, please do and give this a like and watch some of my other videos where I don't talk about sex. Okay, I love you. Bye.